Okay, thanks. Yes, so thanks very much to SEPM for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. This is going to be a slightly more focused presentation than Peter's nice introduction. I'm going to be talking to you today about some really nice mixed sand mud bed forms that we've been looking at the very fringe of submarine fans. And this is work I did in collaboration with my PhD supervisor, Dr. Jaco Bass. So very quickly, some rationale. We've already seen from Peter that many deep water systems contain these really interesting hybrid event beds and transitional flow deposits. And what these deposits show us is that we have a variety of flow types moving through deep marine systems. So we have fully turbulent flows, but we also have flows where the turbulence has been modulated by the presence of cohesive clay. And what I'd like to talk to you about today in my presentation is, well, what do the bed forms produced by these turbulence modulated flows look like? And then I hope this is not too patronizing, but I just wanted to start with talking about how clay can change the fluid dynamics of sediment gravity flows. I think this is really important for discussing flow transformation, and I'm sure that's going to come up a lot today. So going back to the very basics, clay is fundamentally different to larger non-cohesive particles because it has a surface charge when suspended in water. And this means that electrostatic forces of attraction can occur between clay particles, and this can cause clay minerals to flocculate and gel, and this can start to change the fluid dynamics of sediment gravity flows. And that's what I've tried to show in this diagram here. So if we start off with a top box with a dispersed, with the top box we show a dispersed clay in a flow. Here the turbulent forces will be dominating the flow behavior. But if we increase our clay concentration, the clay minerals have a higher chance of colliding and flocculating. We can start to increase the viscosity and the cohesive forces within the flow. If we move down to the bottom box, we have a clay gel. For this part of the flow, we have extremely strong cohesive forces. These can be so strong that they can actually reduce the turbulent forces within the flow. What's important to say is that this is a dynamic system, so we can move up and down this diagram. So if we were in the clay gel regime, but then our flow started to accelerate and move down a steeper slope, turbulent forces could start to break up the clay gel and we could start to move back up the diagram. And there's been some really nice lab work that has tried to characterize this kind of continuum of flow behavior as we increase the clay concentration in the flow. And this slide here shows some schematic diagrams of how the flow behavior might change as we increase clay concentration from Bassett or in 2009. So if we start off with a turbulent flow as our basis and then we increase the clay concentration, we start to move to flows 2 and 3. Because I'm going to be talking about the bed forms that these kind of transitional flows produce, we're going to focus on what's happening at the bottom of the flow in these red boxes. So what's really interesting is that as we initially increase the clay concentration in the flow, we actually increase the turbulent forces near the bed, and that's shown by these larger squiggles. And the reason why we have increased turbulence near the bed is because as we increase the clay concentration, we start to develop a plug, and that creates an extra shear layer within the flow. As we further increase the clay concentration, we go to number 4, you can see we now have a really big, thick plug layer within the flow, and we have reduced turbulence near the bed. So number 1 is kind of a turbulent turbidity current, and number 5 you can think of as a debris flow, and then 2, 3, and 4 are kind of these transitional turbulence modulated, whatever nomenclature you want to use. So there's also been some really nice work looking at the bed forms that are produced by these transitional flows. And these photos are from some lab experiments by Jaco in 2016, which investigated the sedimentary structures produced by different decelerating transitional flows. And he found that really some unique mixed sand mud bed forms. And what's really nice is that because we were in the lab, we could really link the flow behavior to the bed forms produced. So for part of my PhD, I wanted to see, well, can we see these mixed sand mud bed forms in the field, and how can we compare them to the ones we found in the lab? So I'm going to take you to the Mudrich deep marine system that makes up the Aberystwyth Grits Group and the Borth Mudstone Formation. So these rocks outcrop in coastal cliffs in West Wales in the UK. And the system had sediment gravity flows travelling from the southwest into this elongate subbasin, which was bound by northeast striking normal faults. The paleo flow is to the northeast, so trends parallel to the cliff lines. And what's really nice about this system, or really nice about these outcrops, I should say, is that they are wave polished. So we really see in great detail the sedimentary structures. So they're a really great place to do this research. We focused on the very distal part of the system shown in the red box on the diagram on the left. And within this part of the system, we defined two environments following Prelat and Spichala. So based on our sedimentary logs, we said the fringe of the system is where we have a mud content of about 70%. And then even further than that, the distal fringe is where we have a mud content of about 90%. So we really are in the very distal part of the system, and it was extremely muddy. So I'm going to dive straight in and show you the different types of bed forms we observed in the field and the process interpretation. So we recorded 158 bed forms, and from that we identified 3 bed form types based on shape, size, texture, and internal stratification. The first bed form I'll present to you is kind of the classic sandy current ripple. So these were sandstone bed forms which had the typical asymmetric shape and high angle cross lamination. They had average heights of 11 millimeters and average lengths of 141 millimeters. And our process interpretation, like many before us, is that sandy current ripples formed under fully turbulent flows with low cohesive strength. And there's a schematic of the flow behavior we thought produced these flows. The next type of bed form we found in the field we called large current ripples. These were mixed sandstone mudstone bed forms, and they had a variety of textures and characteristics shown in these photos here. So, oh, excuse me, sorry. So they often had muddy fronts that coarsened upstream to sand, and also muddy bases that would coarsen upwards to sand. The bed forms were often climbing with high angle cross lamination. And if I can draw your attention to the size of these bed forms, they had an average height of 19 millimeters and an average length of 274 millimeters. So this is significantly larger than the sandy current ripples we found in the field. So our process interpretation of these bed forms in the lab, large current ripples formed under flows with higher cohesive strength than those that produce the sandy current ripples. And the reason why we have this greater height and length for the large current ripples compared to the sandy current ripples is because the higher cohesive strength in the flows and this development of a plug layer caused the development of internal shear and increased erosion at the base of the bed. Excuse me. So the third type of bed form I'd like to show you is we termed low amplitude bed waves. These bed forms had an average height of 10 millimeters and an average length of 354 millimeters. So they were very different to the other bed forms. Very thin and extremely long. They were often mixed sandstone mudstone as well, but they were also sometimes clean sandstone. They contained low angle cross lamination of about 12 degrees. And again, these bed forms were often climbing. And in the lab, these bed forms formed under flows with extremely high cohesive strength with attenuated turbulence at the base. And this attenuated turbulence created these long, thin bed forms. So we can use these bed forms to infer flow transformation through the system. If I can draw your attention to the figure on the left, this shows the bed form types as we move proximal to distal within our study area. And we can see that as we move distally, the dominant bed form type changes from sandy current ripples to large current ripples to low amplitude bed waves. In the lab, as we increased our clay concentration, we changed our flow behavior from turbulent to transitional to more laminar, and this produced different bed forms. It produced sandy current ripples to large current ripples to low amplitude bed wave. So what we can say is the changes in prevailing bedform type we see through our field area indicates flow transformation to more turbulence modulated transitional flows as the flows travel through the fringe to the distal fringe of the fan. So I focus very much on the Aberystwyth grits group and the Borth mudstone formation, but I'd like to quickly say that we really think it's likely that mixed sand mud bedforms are present in other deep marine systems as well. The reason for that is that these bedforms are formed by these transient turbulent flows, and we know the deposits of these types of flows are really common in many submarine fans. And I just want to finish with saying that we sometimes would see these mixed sandstone mudstone bedforms present in the basis sequences that resembled the hybrid event bed model that Peter's just presented. But these sequences were quite slightly different in that the H1 division, instead of being the massive sandstone, was actually these mixed sandstone mudstone bedforms. So this would obviously change the process interpretation of that H1 division into being produced by a transient turbulent flow. I think this will probably just be the first of many slides today, kind of discussing the variety of hybrid event beds we see in the natural environment. So to conclude, I've shown you these novel mixed sand mud bedforms that we observed in the fringe of a mud-rich deep marine system. We interpreted the large current ripples to form beneath transitional flows with enhanced near-bed turbulence, whereas the low amplitude bed waves were interpreted to form beneath flows with attenuated near-bed turbulence. The down dip trend in dominant bedform type from sandy current ripple via large current ripples to low amplitude bed waves suggests flow transformation to increasingly turbulence modulated cohesive flows. And we really think that large current ripples and low amplitude bed waves are likely to be present in the fringe of other deep marine systems. And if anyone has any examples of these bedforms, it would be great to see them. With that, thank you very much.